The supremacy had conquered 17 species across 3 galactic arms. Their empire stretched across 10,000 star systems. Their warships could crack planets in half. Their soldiers had never known defeat. When their sensor drones first found Earth, the admirals aboard the flagship, Eternal Dominion, looked at the data and laughed. Fleet Admiral stood on the command bridge and studied the blue planet on his screen. His gray skin wrinkled with amusement. His 4 eyes blinked one after another as he read the report. "This is what the scouts found?" he asked his second-in-command. "Yes, Fleet Admiral. The species calls themselves humans. They have existed for approximately 300,000 years. They achieved space travel only recently." Made a sound that was the version of laughter. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "Look at their weapons," he said. "Chemical propellants, kinetic projectiles, they shoot metal pieces at each other." He shook his massive head. "They have nuclear devices they consider powerful. Our shields would not even notice them." The other officers on the bridge joined in the laughter. They had conquered species with plasma cannons and gravity weapons. They had defeated races that could bend light and travel through solid matter. These humans with their primitive rockets and metal bullets were nothing. "What about their defenses?" asked. 47 orbital stations, Fleet Admiral, basic radiation shielding, simple laser point defense systems, a few hundred satellites with missile capabilities. The officer paused. A child's toy could destroy their entire orbital network. Walked to the main viewing window. Outside, his fleet hung in the darkness of space. 100 warships. Each one was 5 kilometers long. Each one carried enough firepower to burn a continent. He had brought this much force out of tradition, not necessity. They always conquered with overwhelming power. It was their way. "Do they have any special abilities?" he asked. "Psionics, dimensional technology, anything." "Nothing, Fleet Admiral. They are remarkably ordinary. They cannot read minds. They cannot manipulate matter with thought. They have no connection to dimensional energy. They are simply meat. Intelligent meat that learned to use tools." "Then this will be quick." Gave the order to broadcast the traditional warning. Every species they conquered received the same message. It was not mercy. It was simply how things were done. The conquered needed to know why they fell. The message went out on every frequency the humans used. It reached their satellites, their ground stations, their primitive communication networks. Billions of humans heard the same words at the same moment. "People of Earth, I am Fleet Admiral of the Supremacy. We have conquered 17 species. We have ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years. Your world now belongs to us. You have 1 rotation of your planet to surrender completely. You will give us your resources. You will give us your people. You will serve the supremacy for eternity. Resistance is mathematically impossible. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your defenses cannot stop us. Accept your fate with dignity, and your suffering will be minimal." The bridge fell silent as they waited for a response. Expected panic. He expected begging. He expected the humans to immediately begin fighting each other as their leaders tried to negotiate separate deals for survival. He had seen it all before. The response came 17 minutes later. It was a single sentence, transmitted on every frequency humanity possessed. The words appeared on the main screen of the Eternal Dominion. Every officer read them at the same time. "We have been waiting for you." Stared at the message. His 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "Waiting," he repeated. "What does this mean?" His communications officer checked the data. The message originated from multiple points simultaneously. Fleet Admiral. Every major population center on the planet sent the same response at the exact same moment. Perfect synchronization. "That is unusual." "There is more, Fleet Admiral. Our deep scanners are detecting something strange on the planet's surface. Energy readings that do not match any known technology." Dismissed this with a wave of his clawed hand. "Primitive energy signatures. Perhaps they are powering up their nuclear weapons. It will not matter." He gave the order to begin the invasion at dawn over the humans' largest population center. The fleet began its descent through Earth's atmosphere. 100 warships darkened the sky. Their engines screamed with power that could reshape mountains. On the planet below, the humans watched them come. But they were not running. They were not screaming. They were not launching their pitiful weapons in desperate defense. They were standing outside their homes, their buildings, their cities. Millions of them. Billions of them. all looking up at the sky with expressions the sensors could not understand. They were smiling, felt something he had not experienced in 300 years of conquest, a small cold feeling in his chest. They had a word for it, though they rarely used it. Doubt. Fleet Admiral, his science officer said, voice uncertain. The energy readings are increasing. The entire planet is beginning to vibrate at a frequency we cannot identify. It is not mechanical. It is not nuclear. It is something else entirely. What kind of something else? I do not know, Fleet Admiral. Our instruments were not designed to measure this. It is as if the planet itself is waking up. Looked at the smiling humans on his display screens. He looked at his mighty fleet descending through the clouds. He looked at the strange energy readings that his officers could not explain. For the first time in 50,000 years of conquest, he wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to turn back now. The invasion had begun. Whatever these humans were waiting for, they would crush it. They always did. Far below, in a facility hidden beneath mountains that humans called the Alps, 7,000 scientists stood at their stations. They had trained their entire lives for this moment. They had studied theories that their teachers said were only mathematical games. They had built machines that their governments said were only for research. Doctor placed her hand on a switch that would change everything. Prometheus protocol is ready, she said into her communicator. Her voice was calm, her hand was steady. On my mark, we remember who we are. Above her, the fleet continued its descent, weapons charging, victory certain. They had no idea what was about to happen. No one in the galaxy did. The invasion force broke through the clouds over the North Atlantic Ocean. 100 warships spread across the sky like a metal plague. Their shadows fell over cities and farmland and forests. Their engines made a sound like thunder that never stopped. Fleet Admiral watched from the Eternal Dominion as his forces took position. Everything was going according to plan. The humans had not fired a single shot. Their orbital defense stations had pulled back without engaging. Their military forces remained in their bases. They have surrendered already, his second-in-command observed. They saw our fleet and gave up, wise choice. But was not so sure. He had conquered many worlds. He knew what surrender looked like. This was something different. Where are their orbital defenders? He asked. They have withdrawn to a tight formation above a single point in northern Europe, Fleet Admiral. All 47 stations are clustered together. They are not attacking. They are not fleeing. They are simply waiting. Waiting for what? No one had an answer. On the ground, scouts reported something even stranger. The humans were not acting like a conquered species. They were not running to shelters. They were not loading weapons. They were not crying or praying or fighting among themselves. They had stopped, all of them, everywhere. In cities across the globe, billions of humans had walked outside. They stood in streets and parks and fields. They stood on rooftops and beaches and mountain paths. They looked up at the sky with calm eyes. Some held hands, some smiled. Some closed their eyes as if listening to music no one else could hear. A species-wide psychological collapse, second-in-command said. It happens sometimes. The shock of seeing our fleet has broken their minds. They have accepted their fate. Perhaps, replied, but that cold feeling in his chest was growing stronger. In the science section of the flagship, officers were shouting at each other. Their instruments were showing readings that made no sense. Walked to their station and demanded an explanation. Fleet Admiral, the planet is generating energy, the chief science officer said. His voice was shaking. Not from power plants or reactors, the planet itself, the rock and soil and water. It is all vibrating at a frequency we have never seen before. Is it a weapon? We do not know. It does not match any weapon signature in our databases. It does not match any natural phenomenon either. The officer pointed to his screen with a trembling claw. There is more. Ancient structures on the planet's surface are activating. Stone circles, pyramids, temples, buildings that are thousands of years old. They are all producing the same energy signature. Stared at the data. Across the planet, dots of energy were appearing on the map. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Old places that humans had built long ago and then forgotten the purpose of. Places their historians called ceremonial or religious. Places that should have been nothing but dead stone. They were all lighting up. One more thing, Fleet Admiral. The science officer zoomed in on a location in the mountains of Central Europe. This facility, The humans call it a particle research center. They told their own people it was for scientific experiments, basic physics. And it is the source. All the energy on the planet is flowing toward this one point, and the readings from inside. The officer stopped. His scales had gone pale. Fleet Admiral, the readings from inside do not exist in our physics. They suggest the presence of dimensional frequencies that should be impossible, frequencies that have not existed in this universe since. He could not finish the sentence. Since when? Demanded. Since the beginning, since before the stars were born. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Doctor stood in a chamber that officially did not exist. Around her, 7,000 scientists worked at stations that controlled machines no government had approved. Machines built from theories that universities had called fantasy. Machines designed to do one thing and one thing only: to wake humanity up. Had spent her entire career studying physics that her colleagues said was impossible. She had found equations hidden in ancient texts. She had discovered patterns in old monuments that matched mathematical constants. She had slowly, carefully, secretly realized the truth that no one was supposed to know. Humans were not what they thought they were. The species that called itself humanity was sleeping, had been sleeping for 100,000 years. The bodies were awake, living their small lives, building their small civilizations. But something deeper was dormant, something vast and ancient and powerful beyond imagination. The Prometheus Protocol was not a weapon, it was not a shield, it was an alarm clock. Looked at the main display. The fleet was descending. Their weapons were charging. In minutes, they would begin burning cities. All stations report ready, her assistant said. Nodded, her hand rested on the activation switch. Such a small thing, such a simple motion, it would change everything forever. Do you think they will forgive us? She asked quietly. When they remember what they are, when they realize we made them forget. Her assistant had no answer. No one did. The original decision to sleep, to forget, to become human had been made so long ago that no record remained of why. Only the promise that if something threatened the sleepers, they would be given the choice to wake. Outside, the ships moved into attack formation. Their plasma lances began to glow. Their targeting systems locked onto population centers where millions of humans stood looking at the sky. Press the switch. The machine hummed. Deep beneath the earth, something stirred. Energy that had slept since before the dinosaurs began to flow. The old monuments drank it in and sent it higher, stronger, faster. Above the facility, the sky began to ripple. Not clouds moving, not light bending. The actual fabric of space and time started to wrinkle like the surface of a disturbed pond. On the Eternal Dominion, every alarm went off at once. Fleet Admiral, the science officer screamed. Something is coming through, something is opening, the dimensional barriers are. The sky tore open. Not a hole, not a portal. Reality itself ripped apart like paper, and through the wound, light poured down. Light that was not light. Light that carried weight and memory and age beyond counting. And with the light came a sound, not heard with ears, felt in the bones, felt in the soul. 8 billion humans opened their eyes at the same moment. And for the first time in 100,000 years, they saw the universe as it truly was. They remembered. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Fleet Admiral looked at the tear in the sky and felt something cold wrap around his hearts. He had made a terrible mistake. They all had a word for impossible death. They called it it meant dying in a way that broke the laws of physics. In 50,000 years of warfare, it had happened perhaps a dozen times. Strange accidents, unexplained events, moments when reality itself seemed to glitch. In the first 3 seconds after the sky tore open, 73 warships experienced or simultaneously. Fleet Admiral watched it happen on his tactical display. One moment the ships existed, hulls intact, crews alive, weapons charging. The next moment they were gone, not destroyed, not damaged, not blown apart by enemy fire. They simply stopped existing. The universe looked at them and decided they had never been there at all. The space where they had floated was empty. The crews that had manned them had never been born. The metal that had formed them had never been mined. Reality edited itself, and 73 warships vanished from history. "What is happening?" screamed. "What is doing this?" His officers had no answers. They were too busy watching their instruments go insane. Every sensor on the Eternal Dominion was showing readings that could not be real, energy levels that exceeded stars, dimensional frequencies that should not exist in this universe. And behind it all a presence, something vast, something ancient, something that was looking at them. Through the tear in the sky, could see shapes that hurt his mind. Geometries that existed in directions his brain could not process. Colors that had no names in any language. Light that somehow screamed with a voice older than time. And he could see something else, something that made his four hearts stop beating for a moment. Eyes, countless eyes, looking down at Earth with recognition, with memory, with love. The planet is not generating the energy, his science officer whispered. His voice was broken. The planet is receiving it. Something is pouring through from somewhere else, somewhere outside our dimension, outside our universe. From where? From the place that existed before everything, from the void that was here before the first stars, from the time before time had meaning. The officer looked at with eyes full of terror. Fleet Admiral, I know what we are facing. I know why the energy signatures seemed familiar. Tell me. The architects, the first kindled, the beings who built reality itself. The officer's voice cracked. They are real, they were always real, and they are here. Every species in the galaxy knew the legends. Before the current universe existed, there had been others. The first beings to achieve consciousness. The first minds to look at chaos and decide to create order. They had built the laws of physics. They had designed the structure of space and time. They had created the dimensions and the barriers between them. And then they had vanished, disappeared so completely that most scientists considered them myths, stories told by primitive cultures to explain things they could not understand. But the legends all agreed on one thing: the architects had not died. They had chosen to leave. They had gone somewhere else, somewhere beyond the universe they had created, and they had never returned. Until now. On the surface of Earth, 8 billion humans stood frozen as memories crashed through their minds. Not their memories, older memories, deeper memories, knowledge that had been locked away for 100,000 years. In Tokyo, a businessman named suddenly understood how gravity worked. Not the human understanding, the real understanding, the equations that existed beneath the equations. He saw how space curved and why it curved and what happened in the places where it curved too much. In Cairo, a young woman named Fatima Abbas felt her consciousness expand beyond her skull. She could sense the minds around her, not read them, feel them, like warm lights in the darkness. 8 billion lights, all flickering with the same ancient fire. In New York, an old man named Thomas Wright looked at the sky and laughed. He remembered building the first stars. He remembered teaching young species to speak. He remembered dancing in the hearts of supernovas just to feel the warmth. They all remembered. The humans had not evolved on Earth. They had chosen Earth. Chosen this small blue world in an unremarkable solar system in an average galaxy. Chosen to be small, chosen to be mortal, chosen to forget. Because being an architect had become too heavy. The wars against the hollow things, the endless responsibility of maintaining reality, the loneliness of being the only true consciousness in a universe full of children. It had broken them, slowly, over billions of years. So they had done something no one thought possible. They had divided themselves, scattered their vast consciousness into billions of tiny fragments, hidden those fragments in mortal flesh, built walls in their own minds to keep the memories out. They had become human. And humanity had lived and loved and suffered and grown. They had built civilizations and destroyed them. They had created art and music and philosophy. They had experienced existence the way their children did, brief, fragile, beautiful. They had been happy. But they had also left a promise to themselves. If something threatened the sleepers, if something tried to destroy the shells they wore, the alarm would sound. The memories would return. The choice would be offered. The had triggered the... On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watched the remaining ships of his fleet try to flee. Some made it into hyperspace. Most did not. Reality kept rewriting itself around them. Ships vanished. Crews disappeared. The laws of physics bent and twisted as something ancient remembered how to use them. They are humans, said. His voice was hollow. They were always just humans. How can they be doing this? His science officer answered with a laugh that held no humor. They were never humans, Fleet Admiral. Humans were always them. We did not invade a primitive world. He pointed at the tear in the sky, at the light pouring through, at the eyes that watched with ancient patience. We rang the doorbell of the gods, and now they are answering. The Eternal Dominion shuddered. Something was pressing against the hull, not physically, conceptually. The ship's existence was being questioned by something that had the authority to ask. Gave the order to retreat. It was already too late. Lieutenant Commander Sarah stood on the bridge of the orbital defense station Thermopylae. She had served in Earth's space forces for 15 years. She had trained for combat against threats from beyond the solar system. She had always known that someday something would come for humanity. She had never expected this. The memories hit her like a wave, not slowly, not gently, all at once. 100 billion years of existence crashed into her consciousness. She saw the void before creation. She felt the first decision to impose order on chaos. She remembered building the scaffolding of reality itself. She remembered being a god. Around her, the crew of the Thermopylae experienced the same thing. Some fell to their knees, some wept. Some laughed with joy at remembering something they had forgotten for so long. Their bodies remained human. The flesh was unchanged. But what lived inside that flesh was waking up. Sarah looked at her hands. They were glowing, not with light from outside, with light from within. The same light that had kindled the first stars, the same fire that had burned at the heart of creation. "My God," her weapons officer whispered. He was staring at his own hands, watching them shimmer with impossible energy. "We were them, the architects, the first kindled. We built the dimensional barriers. We wrote the laws of physics. We created everything." "Yes," Sarah said. Her voice sounded different now, deeper. It harmonized with frequencies that made the station's hull vibrate. "We did, and then we chose to forget." "Why?" Sarah closed her eyes and searched the memories flooding her mind. The answer was there. The reason they had abandoned godhood and become mortal, it was painful to remember. "Because eternity was killing us," she said finally. "Because we had seen everything and done everything and there was nothing left. Because we had fought the hollow things for so long that we were becoming hollow ourselves." She opened her eyes and looked at the crew. "We chose to sleep, to dream, to experience existence as our children did. Brief lives, real stakes, genuine emotion. We chose to be human. Yes, and it worked. For 100,000 years we lived and loved and suffered and grew. We forgot what we were. We became what we pretended to be." Sarah turned to face the viewport. Outside, the fleet was dying. Ships vanished one by one as reality rewrote itself. And now something has woken us up. The flagship was trying to escape. The Eternal Dominion accelerated toward the edge of the solar system, desperate to reach hyperspace. Its weapons fired wildly at nothing, as if shooting at the universe itself might help. Sarah raised one hand. She did not fire a weapon. She did not press a button. She simply remembered how physics worked, not the human understanding. The real rules, the code beneath the code, the agreements that held reality together. She edited one of those agreements. The weapons stopped working, not jammed, not damaged. The very concept of harmful intent was gently removed from their programming. The plasma lances forgot they were supposed to burn. The antimatter warheads lost the desire to explode. The missiles decided they would rather drift peacefully than destroy. Fleet Admiral watched his entire arsenal become useless. His weapons officers screamed at their consoles, trying to understand why nothing worked. The systems were fine. The power was flowing. The targeting was perfect. But the weapons simply refused to cause harm. "What is happening?" he demanded. A voice answered him, not through the communication systems, not through speakers. The voice appeared directly in his mind, transmitted through the underlying mathematics of space and time. It was a human voice, a woman's voice, but it carried weight that no mortal voice should possess. "You came here to conquer," the voice said. "You saw a primitive species and assumed we were prey. You did not ask why we had no advanced weapons. You did not wonder why we had not spread to other stars. You did not consider that perhaps we had chosen to be small." Tried to speak, but his mouth would not move. The voice continued. "We are the architects. We built this universe. We wrote the laws that govern your existence. We could unmake your entire species with a thought." The voice paused. "But we will not. That is not who we choose to be." Across Earth, 8 billion awakened minds reached a consensus. It happened instantly. No debate, no disagreement. They all remembered why they had become human in the first place. They had been tired of power, tired of control, tired of being responsible for everything. They did not want to be gods again, but they also would not be victims. "You have reminded us who we are," Sarah said, speaking aloud now, her voice carrying to every ear through the fabric of reality itself. "For that you have our gratitude. We had slept too long. We had forgotten too much. Your attack has given us back ourselves." She smiled, and reality bent slightly around the expression. The ship's sensors could not process what they were seeing. A human face should not be able to distort space-time. "You also have 10 seconds to leave our solar system," she said. "After that, we will not be responsible for what happens." Found his voice. "What about the ships you have already destroyed? What about my crews?" "They are not destroyed, they are unwritten. There is a difference." Sarah's voice softened slightly. "We do not kill if we can avoid it. That is a choice we made long ago. Your people still exist in the dimensions where we placed them. They are confused and frightened, but they are alive. When you leave, we will return them to you. You would show us mercy after we tried to conquer you. Mercy is what separates us from what we could be. Mercy is why we chose to become human in the first place." Sarah looked at the flagship with ancient eyes. "You are children, violent children, but children nonetheless. We do not destroy children for making mistakes. We punish them, we teach them, and we give them a chance to grow." The remaining ships turned and fled. Their engines burned at maximum power. They did not wait for the 10 seconds to expire. They ran as fast as physics would allow, desperate to escape the system where gods wore human faces. Was the last to leave. Before his ship entered hyperspace, he turned and looked back at the small blue planet that had changed everything. The sky was healing, the tier was closing, but through the narrowing gap he could still see the light, the eyes, the presence that watched with patience that exceeded the age of stars. "What will you do now?" he asked, not knowing if anyone could hear. The answer came anyway, echoing through his mind as his ship vanished into hyperspace. "Now we remember who we are, and we decide who we want to become." The supremacy would later tell their citizens that they had conducted a strategic withdrawal from the Sol system. They would claim that Earth was not worth the resources required to conquer it. They would insist that the losses were minimal and the decision was tactical. The 17 species they had enslaved knew the truth. They had watched the sensor recordings smuggled out by officers who could not live with the lie. They had seen the most powerful fleet in the known galaxy run screaming into hyperspace. They had counted the ships that made it out. Less than 30% survived. But humanity did not pursue them. The awakened architects had no interest in revenge. They had remembered who they were, and with that memory came the wisdom they had earned over billions of years. Violence solved nothing. Conquest created nothing. Power without purpose was just noise. In the weeks that followed, the people of Earth struggled with what they had become. The memories did not fade. They could not forget again, not completely. But they could choose how to carry the weight. Most chose to remain human. The decision happened naturally, without discussion. 8 billion minds reached the same conclusion independently. They had spent 100,000 years being mortal. They had learned to love small things, sunsets, good food, the touch of someone they cared about, the smell of rain on hot pavement. Godhood had nothing to offer that compared to watching a child learn to walk. So they stayed in their human bodies. They kept their human lives. They went back to their jobs and their families and their ordinary concerns. But now they did these things with full knowledge of what they truly were. Every meal was a choice. Every conversation was a gift. Every moment of peace was precious beyond measure. They remembered being gods, and they chose every day to be people instead. But some things had to change. Doctor stood in the facility beneath the Alps, looking at the machine that had changed everything. The Prometheus protocol had done its job. The alarm had sounded. The sleepers had awakened. Now the question was what came next. "We cannot go back to sleep," she said to the gathered scientists. "Not completely. The memories are part of us now." "Do we want to go back to sleep?" asked a young physicist named. His eyes held light that had not been there before. He could see the quantum fluctuations in the air. He could feel the spin of electrons in the walls. "We remember everything now. We remember how to do things that would change the world." "That is exactly why we must be careful." Walked to a window that looked up at the sky. The sun was setting. Orange and pink clouds painted the horizon. Such a simple thing, such a human thing. We built this universe. We created the laws of physics. We could rewrite them if we wanted. But we will not, said. It was not a question. No, we will not, because that is not who we chose to be, turned to face the room. We became human because we were tired of shaping reality. We wanted to live within it instead. That has not changed. We are still tired. We still love being small. But we are not helpless anymore. No, we are not helpless, and that is good. Smiled, and for a moment the light of creation flickered in her eyes. Because there are things in the darkness that remember us, things we fought long ago, things that are still hungry. The hollow things, the enemies from before time had meaning. The creatures that lived in the spaces between dimensions, always pushing against the barriers, always trying to break through. The architects had built the walls of reality to keep them out. They had fought a war that lasted longer than most species existed. And they had won, but they had not destroyed the hollow things completely. Nothing could. They were part of existence itself, a shadow that could never be erased. Now, with the architects awake again, the shadows were stirring. Could feel them in the deep places, curious, cautious, remembering their ancient enemies. We need to be ready, she said. Not to conquer, not to rule, but to protect. 3 weeks after the invasion, Earth received its first diplomatic envoy from beyond the solar system. A ship from the Confederacy of Free Worlds entered the solar system slowly, broadcasting messages of peace on every frequency. They had heard what happened to They had come to see if the legends were true. Ambassador of the species stepped off his shuttle onto the landing pad outside Geneva. He was tall and thin, with silver skin and eyes that held 3 pupils each. He had prepared for this moment for months. He had studied human culture. He had learned human languages. He had tried to imagine what it would be like to meet the architects in person. Nothing had prepared him for what he found. The human representative was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple suit. She carried no weapons. She smiled warmly and shook his hand with ordinary human strength. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "I am Minister Hayes. We are glad you came." Stared at her. He had expected blazing light, cosmic power, the overwhelming presence of beings who had built the universe. Instead, he found a polite government official who offered him coffee and asked about his journey. You are the architects," he managed to say. We still are, technically." Led him to a conference room with ordinary chairs and an ordinary table. "But we prefer to think of ourselves as human now. We chose this life. We like this life." "But you could reshape reality. You could rule the galaxy. You could do anything." "Yes, we could," poured coffee from a ceramic pot. "We could conquer every species in existence. We could remake the universe according to our will. We could play God in ways that no being has ever imagined." She handed him a cup. "But we did all that already, for billions of years, and it was not enough." She sat down across from him. "We learned that power does not create meaning. Control does not create happiness. We found more joy in being mortal for 100,000 years than we found in being gods for an eternity." Took the coffee with shaking hands. "What do you want now? What will you do?" Smiled. It was a human smile. Warm, kind, a little sad. "We want to help. We want to teach. We want to protect." She leaned forward. "There are things in the darkness, things older than the stars, things that would devour everything if they could. We built the barriers that hold them back. Now that we remember, we will maintain those barriers again. And if other species attack you, we will defend ourselves, but we will not conquer, we will not enslave, we will not destroy." Eyes flickered with ancient light for just a moment. "That is our choice. That is who we are now." Returned to his ship with a message for the galaxy. Humanity was awake. Humanity remembered what they truly were, and humanity had made a choice that no one expected. They had chosen to be guardians, not rulers, not conquerors, protectors of the younger species who shared the universe with them. The Confederacy of Free Worlds spread the news. Within months, every species knew. The architects had returned. They were wearing human faces, and they were offering something no galactic power had ever offered before. Help without cost, without conditions, without conquest. The 17 species enslaved by though were freed within a year. Not by human armies, by human teachers showing how hollow their empire had become, by human diplomats negotiating terms that benefited everyone, by human scientists sharing knowledge that would have taken to discover alone. And in the cold spaces between dimensions, where the hollow things lurked and waited, something changed. For eons they had pressed against the barriers, searching for weakness. Now they felt the presence of their ancient enemies again. The architects were awake. For the first time since the beginning of the universe, the hollow things retreated. They were afraid. On Earth, 8 billion beings who had chosen to be human lived their ordinary lives. They raised children. They created art. They loved and lost and laughed and cried. They enjoyed sunsets and good food and the company of people they cared about. But now, when they looked at the stars, they did not feel small. They felt connected, part of something vast and ancient and full of purpose. They had built this universe. They would protect it. And they would do so not as gods standing above creation, but as people living within it. That was their gift to themselves. That was the meaning of being human. And in the quiet moments when the world was still, they could feel it. The warmth of 8 billion souls, all carrying the same ancient fire, all remembering the same eternal truth. They were never alone. They had never been alone, and whatever darkness came, they would face it together. Not as gods, as family,